The first box came back to me unopened, and that's when I realized love can be returned like unwanted mail. I remember the weight of it in my hands, light, almost insultingly so, when the delivery man placed it back on my porch. The same brown paper. The same careful tape I'd smoothed down with my thumb the night before, my handwriting still neat in the corner, spelling her name the way she preferred it spelled. For a moment I wondered if there'd been a mistake. Addresses get mixed up, packages get lost, people get busy. But then I saw the sticker, return to sender, no note, no apology, no explanation, just silence pressed flat against cardboard. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the cicadas in the hedges and the faint hum of my refrigerator through the screen door. It was a warm afternoon, the kind that smells like cut grass and dust, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world didn't stop when something inside me did. That box held a silk scarf, pale blue. I'd chosen it because she once said blue made her feel calm. She said it casually, stirring her coffee, not even looking at me. I'd tucked that detail away like a promise to myself. See, I'm listening. I carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table, the same table where my son used to do his homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and patched arguments with pie. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what was inside. What I didn't know, what I couldn't understand, was why it had come back. That was the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Before all this, my life was quiet in the best possible way. I lived alone in the house my late husband and I had bought when interest rates were still something you could understand without a calculator. The walls held echoes, his laugh, my son's teenage complaints, the low murmur of a radio at night. I worked part-time at the library, shelving books and helping older folks find large print mysteries. On Sundays I baked. On Wednesdays I watered the plants. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady. It was mine. My son Gregory was my only child. He'd always been gentle, the kind of boy who said thank you to bus drivers and brought me daisies from the yard because he thought store-bought flowers were a waste. When he married Rachel, I tried to make room in my heart the way my mother had taught me, by opening it wider, not guarding it tighter. Rachel was polished, careful. She spoke softly but with an edge that made people lean in. She never raised her voice, but she didn't need to. Her silences did the work for her. At first I mistook that for shyness. I thought she just needs time, so I gave her time, and space, and kindness. I sent gifts on birthdays and holidays. Little things at first, a cookbook I thought she'd like, a candle that smelled like oranges and cloves, a sweater I knit while watching the snow fall. Each time I waited. Each time I checked my phone like a teenager, hoping for a message that said thank you. It means a lot. Nothing came. Then the packages started coming back, the cookbook still wrapped, the candle unlit, the sweater folded exactly as I'd sent it, my stitches untouched, always returned without a word. Gregory never mentioned them, Rachel never called. The silence became its own kind of language, and I tried to translate it without accusing anyone of malice. Maybe she doesn't like gifts, I told myself. Maybe this is her way of keeping things simple. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. So I stopped sending things for a while. I stopped reaching first. I told myself that love didn't need proof, that my son knew I was here. Life went on in small, predictable steps. The library smelled like old paper and lemon polish. My neighbor waved every morning at 8. I learned to live with the quiet where gratitude should have been. Then, one evening, the phone rang. It was Gregory. His voice sounded tired, stretched thin like fabric pulled too far. We talked about the weather, about his work, about nothing at all. And then, carefully, like he was stepping around broken glass, he said, "Mom, Rachel's been having a hard time." I held the receiver tighter. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "She's stressed," he continued. "About money." The word landed differently than the others. He'd never brought it up before, not like this. "We're thinking," he said slowly, "that maybe you could help, just temporarily." I didn't answer right away. I looked around my kitchen, the worn linoleum, the calendar with my doctor's appointments circled in red, the box on the table that had come back to me unopened. I thought of the scarf still folded inside, of the gifts returned like mistakes. "How?" I asked. There was a pause. Long enough for me to hear Rachel in the background, her voice low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone. It was the same one she used when she wanted something without asking for it directly. "Well," Gregory said, clearing his throat, "you've always been good with saving. Rachel thinks maybe you could loan us some money from your savings." Loan, savings, Rachel thinks. In that moment, everything clicked into place, not all at once, but enough to make my chest tighten. The unopened boxes. The silence, the sudden remembering of my existence when numbers entered the conversation. I didn't say no, not yet. I told him I needed time to think. After we hung up, I sat alone at the table until the light outside faded and the house filled with shadows. I reached for the box, finally opened it, and pulled out the blue scarf. The silk slid through my fingers, cool and smooth, exactly as it had been when I bought it. I pressed it to my cheek and felt something steady rise up beneath the hurt, not anger, awareness. Because when gifts are returned without explanation, but hands open when money is mentioned, you begin to understand what you've been to someone all along. And that understanding changes everything. That night's sleep came in fragments. I drifted off only to wake again, the ceiling fan ticking softly like it was counting something I'd forgotten. I kept seeing the scarf in my hands, the way it had never even been touched by her skin. Gifts are strange things, they carry intention more than value. When they're rejected, it's not the object that comes back bruised, it's the meaning. By morning, I had made coffee strong enough to bite back. I stood at the sink, watching steam curl up toward the window, and tried to sort my thoughts the way I sorted library books, one at a time, carefully, without forcing them where they didn't belong. Gregory hadn't asked outright. He rarely did. He'd always been a child who hoped needs would be noticed before they had to be spoken. Rachel, on the other hand, knew how to ask without appearing to. She framed requests as worries, worries as necessities, necessities as inevitabilities. It was a talent, really, a quiet one. I told myself to be practical. They're young, I reasoned. Life is expensive. You help family when you can. That's what my parents taught me. That's what I taught Gregory. Still, there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake, like a warning bell muffled under layers of politeness. I decided to invite them over. I wanted to look Rachel in the eye when we talked about money. I wanted to see if the warmth I'd offered for years, through gifts, through patience, would finally be acknowledged when something was being asked of me. They came on a Sunday afternoon. I made chicken stew, the kind that simmers low and fills the house with the smell of onions and thyme. I set the table with my good placemats, the ones with the faint coffee stain in the corner that never quite came out. I told myself not to read into things. Rachel arrived empty-handed. Gregory carried a bottle of wine, smiling apologetically like he was already bracing for something. She hugged me lightly, her arms barely closing, her cheek cool against mine. "Smells nice," she said, glancing past me into the kitchen. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm glad you came." We ate. We talked about safe things, work schedules, traffic, a neighbor's new dog. Rachel complimented the stew without taking seconds. Gregory did, as always. I watched them from across the table, noticing the way she touched his arm when he spoke too much, the way he fell quiet when she did. After dessert, store-bought pie, because I didn't trust my hands to bake, I poured tea and finally said, "Gregory mentioned you've been under some stress." Rachel's smile tightened just a fraction. "Yes," she said, "it's been a lot." I waited. Silence has a way of inviting truth if you let it stretch. "We're trying to get ahead," she continued. "Rent keeps going up, unexpected expenses." She sighed, delicate and practiced. "It's hard to plan when everything feels uncertain." Gregory nodded. "Mom's always been good at planning," he added, looking at me with something like hope. I folded my hands around my cup. "And what is it you're hoping for?" I asked gently. Rachel didn't miss a beat. "We were wondering if you'd consider helping us, just until we're back on our feet. You have savings," and we thought, well, family helps family. There it was, clean, simple, no mention of the returned gifts. No acknowledgement of the distance she'd built brick by brick. Just a neat bridge from my account to their need. I didn't answer right away. I watched the steam rise from my tea, the way it blurred the edges of the room. "I do have savings," I said slowly. "They're meant to last me." "Of course," Rachel replied quickly. "And we'd never want to put you at risk. It would be temporary, a loan." "Alone's the word again, like it softened the request." I glanced at Gregory. "What do you think?" I asked him. He shifted in his chair. I think it would help." "A lot?" Rachel reached for his hand, squeezing once, not affection, emphasis. I nodded. "I need time," I said, "to look at things, to consider." Her smile flickered just for a moment. "Of course," she said, "take all the time you need." But as they stood to leave, she added casually, "We were hoping to move soon. There's a place we like, the timing matters." After the door closed behind them, the house felt different, quieter somehow, but not peaceful. I cleared the table slowly, my movements deliberate, like if I went fast I might knock something important over. That evening I opened my savings folder, bank statements, retirement projections. Notes I'd made in the margins years ago, back when my husband was still alive and we planned for a future that assumed we'd grow old together. These numbers weren't abstract to me, they were groceries, medications, heat in winter, independence. I thought about the gifts again. About how every physical offering had been rejected without explanation, and how now suddenly my role as mother-in-law had been reactivated, not with warmth but with calculation. Still, doubt crept in. Am I being unfair? I wondered. Is this just pride talking? 2 days later, another box arrived. This one was smaller. I recognized my own handwriting immediately. Inside was the candle I'd sent months ago, still sealed. The return label dated last week. I sat on the edge of the couch holding it, feeling something settle in me, not sharp, not explosive, but firm. That evening, Rachel called. Her voice was sweet. I just wanted to check in, she said, see if you'd had a chance to think. I looked at the candle on the coffee table, untouched, unburned. I have, I said, and, she prompted. I have questions, I replied, a pause. About the loan. About the gifts, I said calmly, the ones you returned. Silence stretched, I could almost hear her recalculating. Oh, she said finally, that, I didn't think it mattered. It mattered to me, I said. Well, she continued, her tone cooling, I just don't like clutter. I prefer experiences over things. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Then why ask for my savings? Another pause, this one longer. That's different, she said. Yes, I agreed quietly. It is. We ended the call shortly after, polite, controlled, nothing resolved. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to the house settle, I knew something had shifted. The pattern was clear now, laid out like an open book. Gifts returned, boundaries tested, money requested. I wasn't angry, I was awake. And once you're awake, you don't pretend to be asleep again, not even for family. After that call, something in me grew still, not numb, steady. Like a lake after a storm has passed, the surface calm but the depth changed forever. I went back to the library the next day and shelved books with more care than usual, my fingers tracing spines like they were old friends. People think clarity arrives with noise, with shouting or slammed doors. But for me, it arrived quietly between the romance section and large print biographies under fluorescent lights that hummed like they always had. Rachel's words echoed in my mind, that's different. She was right. It was different, and the difference mattered. When I got home, I did something I'd been putting off for years. I called my financial advisor. His name was Martin, a patient man with a soft voice who had helped my husband and me plan our retirement long before illness shortened our timeline. We sat at the dining table with papers spread between us. He listened as I explained the situation, not dramatically, not accusingly, just facts. She returned gifts, he asked gently. Yes, I said, everyone, and now they're asking for access to your savings? A loan, I corrected. Then paused, that's what they're calling it. Martin nodded slowly, and what do you call it? I stared at the numbers on the page, the totals I'd worked my whole life to protect. I don't know yet, I admitted. That's why I needed to talk. He leaned back. Helping family isn't wrong, he said, but helping at the cost of your security is, especially if respect isn't present. Respect. The word landed softly but firmly. That night Gregory came by alone. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped like he'd been carrying something heavier than a conversation. We sat in the living room, the lamp casting a warm circle around us. I poured him tea the way I always had. She's worried you're upset, he said. I'm not upset, I replied. I'm thinking, he sighed. Rachel thinks you're taking it personally. I am, I said simply, because it is personal. He frowned. She didn't mean it that way. I studied his face, the lines that hadn't been there a few years ago, the uncertainty in his eyes. Gregory, I asked quietly, do you know she returned the gifts? He hesitated. She mentioned not wanting things. Did she tell you she sent them back unopened? Silence, his jaw tightened. No, I nodded. Did you wonder why I stopped sending them? I thought maybe you were busy. I thought maybe she didn't want me around, I said. We were both guessing. He rubbed his temples. She doesn't dislike you, Mom. I didn't say she did, I replied, but liking someone and valuing them aren't always the same. That hit him. I could tell by the way he looked down at his cup, the way his fingers traced the rim. She's under a lot of pressure, he said weakly. So am I answered, just quieter about it. He didn't argue, he couldn't. Before he left, he asked, "Are you going to help us?" I looked at my son, the boy who once believed daisies were enough, and said, "I'm going to protect myself." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I drafted a message, not emotional. Not cold, just clear. "I've thought carefully about your request. I won't be lending money from my savings. These funds are set aside for my long-term care. I hope you understand." I read it 3 times before sending. The response came within minutes. Rachel called. This time, she didn't bother with softness. "I don't understand," she said sharply. "You're choosing money over family?" "No," I replied evenly. "I'm choosing boundaries." She scoffed. "We're not asking for everything, just help." "Help looks different when it's mutual," I said, "and when there's respect." "What does that even mean?" she snapped. "It means acknowledging the relationship you're asking to benefit from," I answered, "not ignoring it until it's convenient." Her breath caught. "This feels judgmental." "It's reflective," I said. She went quiet, then said, "Gregory will be disappointed." "I know," I replied. "That hurts me too." The line went dead. For a few days I heard nothing, then the calls started from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in months. "I heard you refused to help," one aunt said carefully. "I heard they're struggling," a cousin added. The story had traveled, not accurately but efficiently. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I simply said I made a decision that was right for me. Some understood, some didn't. Gregory stopped calling for a while. The silence hurt, but it didn't confuse me anymore. One afternoon, I found myself back at the kitchen table with the blue scarf laid out in front of me. I folded it slowly, smoothing the silk, and placed it in the drawer with my important things, documents, letters, memories, not as a gift anymore, as a reminder. A week later, Rachel posted something online, not directly about me, never directly, just a quote about toxic parents and emotional manipulation disguised as generosity. I closed the app without commenting. The truth has a way of surfacing without being pushed, and I was done pushing. For the first time in a long while, I felt aligned with my values, with my limits, with myself. It wasn't empowering in a loud way. It was grounding, like standing on solid earth after realizing how close you'd been to sinking. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew this much: I had finally stopped mistaking obligation for love, and that was only the beginning. The quiet that followed my decision wasn't empty, it was charged. Like the air before rain, every sound in the house felt louder, every pause more deliberate. I went about my routines, watering the plants, folding laundry, walking to the corner store, but there was a hum beneath it all, a sense that something unseen was shifting. It didn't take long for the confrontation to arrive. It came on a Thursday evening, unannounced. I was in the middle of making soup when I heard the knock, firm, impatient. I knew before I opened the door who it would be. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, her coat still on like she wasn't planning to stay long. Gregory lingered a step behind her, eyes tired, shoulders tense. "We need to talk," she said, already stepping inside. I turned off the stove and gestured toward the living room. "All right." She didn't sit, she paced. "This situation has been blown out of proportion," she began. "We asked for help, you said no, fine, but the way you did it—" "I was clear," I said calmly. "You were cold," she snapped. "And then you start questioning my character over a few returned gifts." I folded my hands in my lap. I questioned the pattern. She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Patterns you're reading into things?" "Am I?" I asked. "Every gift returned, no explanation, then money becomes urgent." Gregory shifted. "Mom, maybe I'm talking now," Rachel cut in, not looking at him. Then to me, "You don't know how hard it is to feel judged in your own family." I met her gaze. "Do you know how hard it is to feel invisible until you're useful?" The room went still. She stared at me, surprised not by my words but by my tone. I wasn't pleading, I wasn't angry, I was steady. "That's not fair," she said finally. "We included you. Did you?" I asked. "Or did you tolerate me?" Gregory swallowed. "Rachel." "No," she said, turning to him. "She's accusing me." "I'm naming my experience," I replied. "There's a difference." Rachel exhaled, then softened her voice just enough. "Look, maybe I mishandled some things, but this money would have helped us move forward." "And my security?" I asked. "Where does that fit in your plan?" She hesitated, just a beat too long. Gregory stepped in. "We'd make it right, Mom." "I believe you would try," I said, "but belief doesn't pay medical bills." That landed. Rachel straightened. "So that's it, you're choosing fear over trust?" "No," I said, "I'm choosing self-respect over guilt." Her eyes flashed. "You're being selfish." I stood, slowly. Selfish is asking someone to sacrifice their future while dismissing their presence. Silence again, thick this time. Gregory looked between us, torn. "Mom, I wish you'd said something sooner." "I did," I replied softly, in the ways I knew how. They left shortly after, no hugs, no closure, just the sound of the door closing with more force than necessary. That night I cried, not because I doubted myself, but because standing firm costs something. Especially when love is involved. The next few weeks were harder than I expected. Family gatherings became tense. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. I heard whispers, "She's stubborn. She doesn't understand young people. She has money and won't help." I let them talk. What surprised me was who didn't. One afternoon at the library, Mrs. Hanley, the same woman who borrowed romance novels every Tuesday, stopped me between shelves. "I heard what happened," she said gently. I braced myself. She smiled. "Good for you." I blinked. "Excuse me, my daughter took advantage of me for years," she said quietly. "I wish I'd learned earlier what you're learning now." It wasn't loud support, but it was real. Then something unexpected happened. Rachel's mother called. We'd never been close, polite, distant. Her voice on the phone was measured. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that I returned gifts for years too. I didn't want to offend her." I closed my eyes. "I see. She has a way of controlling narratives," she continued. "I'm sorry you're on the receiving end now. The truth has many witnesses, they just don't speak at the same time." A month later, Gregory came alone again. He looked older, quieter. "She's still upset," he said. "I know," I replied. "She feels embarrassed." "I understand." He hesitated. "But I've been thinking about what you said. About being invisible." I waited. "She didn't tell me about the returns because she didn't want me to feel conflicted," he admitted. "But that choice created a different conflict." I nodded. "Truth often does." He looked at me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached for his hand. "Thank you for saying that." We didn't solve everything that day, but something softened. Not between me and Rachel, but between me and my son. And sometimes that's the first healing that matters. I still hadn't heard from Rachel directly. But I knew the story wasn't over. Because when people lose access, they often try to regain control. And I had a feeling her next move wouldn't be quiet. I didn't have to wait long to find out what her next move would be. It arrived disguised as concern. A week after Gregory's visit, I received a voicemail from Rachel. Her voice was softer than it had been in weeks, almost careful, like someone approaching a skittish animal. "I just wanted to check on you," she said. "You sounded stressed last time we spoke. I hope you're taking care of yourself." I listened to it twice, the way the words curved around something unsaid. Concern can be sincere, it can also be strategic. After everything that had happened, I trusted my instincts more than her tone. I didn't call back. 2 days later, my neighbor Mrs. Klein knocked on my door, her purse clutched tightly in front of her. "I hope you don't mind me asking," she said, lowering her voice. "But are you feeling all right? Gregory's wife mentioned you've been under a lot of pressure." My stomach tightened, not in panic but in recognition. "I'm fine," I said. "Why do you ask?" "She said you've been forgetful," Mrs. Klein continued. "That you might need help managing things." There it was, not an accusation, a suggestion, the kind that spreads easily because it sounds caring. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the grain of the wood, thinking about how narratives are built. Brick by brick, word by word, never enough to accuse, just enough to plant doubt. That evening, Gregory called. "She didn't mean it like that," he said immediately. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it effective." He was quiet. Then, "She's worried you're isolating yourself." "I'm protecting myself," I said. "There's a difference." "She thinks if you had support." "Support doesn't start with questioning someone's stability," I interrupted gently. He sighed. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything," I said. "Just pay attention." The next day, I made a decision. I gathered every returned gift, every box, every label. I laid them out on the dining table like evidence, not for revenge, not for confrontation, but for clarity. Then I wrote a letter, not to Rachel, to myself. I wrote about the woman I had been before, generous, hopeful, eager to please. I wrote about how easily love can slip into self-erasure if you're not careful. And I wrote about the moment I chose differently. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the blue scarf. A week later, Rachel requested a meeting. "Neutral ground," she said. "A cafe," I agreed. She arrived first, seated with her phone face down on the table. She looked composed, polished, ready. "I wanted to clear the air," she began. Things have been misunderstood. I'm listening, I said. She leaned forward. I worry about you being alone. About managing finances, maybe we all need to be more involved. Involved how? I asked. She smiled faintly. Shared decisions, transparency. I met her gaze. You want oversight. She didn't deny it. We just want what's best. For whom? I asked. She hesitated. For everyone, I nodded. Then let's start with honesty. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I know you've been telling people I'm not well, I said calmly, that I'm forgetful, that I need help. That's not what I said, she replied quickly. It's what they heard, I said. And it's not true, she exhaled. You're overreacting. No, I said, I'm responding. I reached into my bag and placed a return label on the table, then another, and another. These are the gifts I gave you, I said, returned unopened without explanation. She looked away. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered when you asked for my savings, I replied, because it showed me how you see me. Her jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I'm being factual. I stood. I won't be lending money. I won't be managed. And I won't be spoken about as if I'm not in the room. She stared at me, stunned not by my refusal, but by my refusal to bend. This will affect your relationship with Gregory, she warned. I know, I said. And I trust him to decide what kind of man he wants to be. I left before she could respond. That night Gregory called. She told me what happened, he said, and I asked. He was quiet for a long time. I think she crossed a line. I closed my eyes. Relief came not as celebration but as release. She says you're pushing her away. I'm stepping back, I replied. There's a difference? I need time, he said. I understand, and I meant it. Because boundaries don't always bring people closer right away. Sometimes they bring truth. And truth, when it finally surfaces, changes everything. The weeks that followed felt like standing in the long shadow of a storm that had already passed. The damage was visible, but the air was finally clear enough to breathe. I didn't wake up anxious anymore. I woke up alert, aware of myself in a way I hadn't been before. Gregory didn't call as often, but when he did, his voice sounded different. Less defensive, more thoughtful. He asked questions now instead of delivering messages on Rachel's behalf. How did you plan for retirement? He asked one evening. I smiled sadly. Carefully, I said, and with the understanding that no one else would do it for me. There was a pause. I wish I'd known how much pressure you were under, he said. You're learning now, I replied. That counts. Rachel, on the other hand, went quiet. No calls, no messages, no public quotes, just absence. And absence, I'd learned, can be as loud as accusation. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email, a letter, addressed in careful handwriting that wasn't hers. It was from a lawyer. My hands didn't shake when I opened it. That surprised me. The letter was polite, professional, and unmistakably strategic. It suggested, without accusing, that I might benefit from support in managing assets and that the family was concerned about recent decisions. Concern again, that word had been worn thin. I called Martin. He read the letter quietly, then looked up. They're testing you, he said, seeing if you'll fold. I won't, I replied. Good, he said, because you don't need to. We drafted a response, clear, firm, documented. I mailed it the same day. 2 days later, Gregory came over. He looked like he hadn't slept. She hired a lawyer, he said, sitting heavily on the couch. Yes, I replied, she did. She says she's protecting me. I know what she says, I answered. I also know what she does. He ran his hands through his hair. I didn't know she'd go that far. I did, I said gently. Because when access is denied, control becomes the goal. He looked at me then, not as a son asking a favor, but as a man confronting a truth. She returned the gifts because she didn't want to owe you, he said slowly. Didn't she? I nodded. Owing someone creates balance, control needs imbalance. That was the moment something shifted in him. I could see it, the way his posture changed, the way his eyes steadied. I've been complicit, he said quietly. You've been trusting, I replied. There's a difference. He swallowed. I don't know how to fix this. You start by seeing clearly, I said. The rest follows. The lawyer never contacted me again. Rachel didn't apologize. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. What surprised me was how my life expanded once I stopped shrinking it for others. I joined a walking group. I laughed more. I felt lighter, not because the conflict was gone, but because my role in it was finally honest. One afternoon, Gregory asked if he could come by for dinner. Alone. We cooked together the way we used to when he was younger. He chopped vegetables unevenly like always. We talked about ordinary things, safe things, then he said, I told her I need space. I kept my voice even. How did she take it? Not well, he admitted, but I needed to say it. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, he smiled faintly. I learned it from you. That night, as I washed dishes, I realized something important. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about legacy, not what I left behind, but what I modeled. I had shown my son that love doesn't mean surrender, that generosity without respect becomes exploitation. That boundaries aren't punishments, they're invitations to healthier relationships. Rachel may never understand that, but Gregory was learning, and that, in its own quiet way, felt like justice. I went to bed that night with the window open, the sound of crickets filling the room. I thought about the woman I had been when the first box came back to me unopened, and the woman I was now, stronger, clearer, unapologetically whole. Time has a way of revealing what confrontation cannot. Months passed. The seasons changed the way they always do, quietly, without asking permission. Leaves fell, days shortened. My routines settled into something new, something steadier. I still worked at the library, I still baked on Sundays. But there was a lightness in my steps now, a sense that I was living from the center of myself instead of the edges. Gregory came by more often. Sometimes we talked about his work. Sometimes we sat in companionable silence, listening to the old radio my husband used to love. He never mentioned money anymore, not once. Rachel remained distant. She sent messages occasionally, brief, neutral, invitations filtered through Gregory, never directly to me. I declined politely, not out of spite, out of discernment. One afternoon, Gregory arrived with a small box. I found this while we were cleaning, he said. I thought you should have it. Inside was the cookbook I'd given Rachel years ago, still unopened. The pages crisp, untouched by use or care. I didn't know she kept it, he said quietly. I didn't know either, I replied. He shook his head. I think she wanted to return it but also didn't want to let it go. I traced the edge of the book with my finger. That's what control often looks like, I said. Possession without appreciation. He nodded slowly. That evening after he left, I placed the cookbook on my shelf, not as a symbol of loss, but as proof. Proof that my instincts had been right, that I hadn't imagined the imbalance. A week later, I received an unexpected message from Rachel. She asked if we could talk. No cafe this time, no lawyer, just a request. I considered it carefully before agreeing. She came to the house on a rainy afternoon. No makeup, no coat. She looked smaller somehow, less polished, more exposed. I don't want to fight anymore, she said. I don't either, I replied. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had held returned boxes and quiet realizations. I felt threatened by you, she admitted finally. Your stability, your independence, it made me feel unnecessary. I listened. I didn't want to owe you, she continued. Gifts create obligation, money felt transactional, easier to control. There it was, not an apology but an explanation. I see, I said. She looked up, eyes searching my face. I didn't mean to hurt you. I believe that, I replied, but intention doesn't erase impact. She nodded. I know. We sat in silence for a while. I won't ask for your savings again, she said eventually. I know, I replied, and I won't speak about you to others, she added. Not like that. I appreciate that, I said. She hesitated. Will you forgive me? Forgiveness is a word people use when they want relief more than repair. I forgive you, I said slowly. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Her shoulders slumped, not in anger but in understanding. I understand, she said. When she left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt complete. That night, Gregory called. She told me you talked, he said. Yes, I replied. She said you were kind. I was honest, I said. He exhaled. Thank you. As I lay in bed later, I thought about how far we'd come from unopened gifts to attempted control to quiet reckoning. The lesson wasn't loud. It didn't come with triumph or punishment. It came with boundaries. With the realization that self-respect is not selfish, that love offered freely should never be demanded, that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can say is not yes, but enough. I reached into the drawer beside my bed and took out the blue scarf. I wrapped it loosely around my neck, the silk cool against my skin. It fit me perfectly, not because it was ever meant for me, but because I had reclaimed it. I turned off the light, the room settling into darkness, and felt something rare and precious settle inside me. Peace. The house felt different after that conversation with Rachel. Not lighter exactly, but settled. Like furniture that's finally been placed where it belongs after years of being shifted to accommodate someone else's comfort. I moved through my days with a deeper sense of ownership, not just of my home or my savings, but of my life. I stopped second-guessing my instincts. I stopped rehearsing explanations in my head for choices that no longer required justification. Gregory came for dinner the following Sunday. Rachel didn't come, and for the first time, that absence didn't feel like a wound. We cooked together again. He laughed more easily now. He told me about small things, annoying coworkers, a book he was reading, a walk he'd taken alone just to think. I didn't realize how much I'd been avoiding silence, he admitted, stirring the pot. She always filled it. Silence tells the truth, I said. That's why some people are afraid of it. He nodded. After dinner, we sat on the porch as dusk settled in. The air smelled like rain and warm earth. Fireflies blinked softly in the yard, their small lights appearing and disappearing like thoughts you don't need to chase. I want you to know something, he said. No matter what happens in my marriage, I won't let anyone speak about you like that again. I looked at him, not the little boy with daisies, not the man caught between loyalties, but my son, standing in his own spine. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. He hesitated. I think this was a lesson I needed. So was I replied. Weeks turned into months. Rachel kept her distance. When we crossed paths at family events, we were polite, civil, no forced closeness, no performance, and that was enough. I noticed something else too. Other women friends, neighbors, even strangers at the library started opening up to me. My son keeps borrowing money, one whispered. My daughter-in-law controls everything, another said. They weren't asking for advice. They were asking for permission to choose themselves. I never told them what to do. I just told them what I'd learned. That love doesn't require self-erasure. That generosity without boundaries invites resentment. That saying no doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. One afternoon, as I reorganized the drawer where I kept important things, I found the letter I'd written to myself months earlier. I read it slowly, remembering the woman who had written it, uncertain, wounded, waking up. I added a new page. I kept my savings. But more importantly, I kept my dignity. I learned that people who return your kindness unopened are not entitled to your sacrifices. I learned that being needed is not the same as being loved. I folded the pages neatly and placed them back in the drawer. Life didn't become perfect. There were still lonely days, still moments when I wished things had been simpler. Still grief for what I'd hoped the relationship might be, but there was no bitterness, only clarity, and clarity is a kind of peace. Now when I give with intention. When I help without guilt. And when I say no, I say it without apology. Because I understand something I didn't before, money can be replaced, time cannot. Self-respect once lost is the hardest thing to recover. I kept mine, and if you're listening to this story, I want to ask you something gently, honestly, without judgment. Have you ever been generous to someone who only remembered you when they needed something? Have you ever confused love with obligation? And if so, what would it look like for you to choose yourself today? If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own quiet battles and hard-earned boundaries, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about family, betrayal, strength, and finding yourself again, remember to subscribe and support the channel. Because sometimes hearing someone else's truth gives us permission to finally speak our own.